Good morning. It is Chris Lee and Gavin Schoenwald of Southeastern 14 here to talk some SEC football today. We apologize for the late start. Had family errands to run. My daughter had to go to the orthodontist, if we're being completely transparent. So couldn't get around it. Had to start late today. We usually start at 11, so apologies to our regulars who had to wait on that. I think we put out a notification, but could be wrong. But anyway, just getting that out of the way. Our apologies for throwing you off your routine here. Hope to make it up for you in the end. As always, looking for sponsors for the channel. Caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. If you are interested, Gavin, my man, hope you're having a good day. See you wearing your Niners gear.
Yeah. Had a tough loss on Monday, but hopefully we bounce back. 2 in a row we've dropped now, so tough one. But fired up for today's show, Chris. I know you've been prepping a lot for this one. I've done, my research as well, and I think we're shaping up for a really interesting game here with maybe some intricacies that people aren't thinking about in Jacksonville. So fired up to talk about it.
I would call you a bandwagon fan, but except you were trading paint with those guys back in the summer. So
I was with the Niners for a little bit, and so I guess I can claim them as my team moving forward. It's hard to be a Titans fan nowadays, y'all. And
my God.
So I technically I can't just say I jumped right on the bandwagon. I was there, and in the locker room and everything. And so hopefully that gives me some street cred.
Yeah, the Titans are currently becoming the Oakland A's of football. But anyway, enough about that. Let's get into it today. We're going to talk about Florida and Georgia, and more specifically, what Florida can do to beat Georgia. Because, again, these are words that I did not think 2 months ago, probably even a month ago, we would be uttering. But despite the fact that Florida is roughly a 15-point underdog, I can see some ways, because Florida has been, I think, better than I expected.
Yep.
There have been some rough moments in there. The Kentucky game was awful. Let's not get around that. But most teams have had a bad game at some point, including Georgia. Georgia's didn't come with those kind of consequences because Georgia's schedule's not been great. But the Bulldogs have not been the juggernaut, I think, that a lot of people expected. The defense is not – I mean, it's great, but it's not elite.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a Jordan Davis in there like some teams we've seen. So I think this game has become suddenly more interesting than we would have guessed.
Absolutely. And I think preseason, when we're going down each team's schedule and we see this game, we see Georgia, Florida, that's a game that Georgia should win. I still think that narrative is there, but I think that because there's a little bit of doubt in terms of this Georgia team that we're seeing. They're not the juggernaut, like you said, Chris, that they've been in previous years. Not only that, but they're fresh off of losing their best player against Vandy. And then you have on the other side have a Florida team who I would say, honestly, look, the Utah game was embarrassing because it's season opening, SEC versus Pac-12, you go on the road and you get beat by, multiple scores there. And then you just lay a dud versus Kentucky. But overall, I think I'm more so impressed with this Florida team, I'd say, overall, and how they've started the season. So the narrative's coming from both sides, going into this game. I think it sets up for an intriguing matchup. I think, we'll get into this in detail later in the show, but there's some maybe keys for Florida and how they can beat Georgia. I have a couple of those in my mind. I'm sure you do too, Chris, but I'm really, really fired up for this one because I don't think this is going to be a pushover like it's been, a little bit in the past 2 years. I think this is going to be a really competitive game, so I'm excited to dive into it.
Well, first of all, the Utah game. How many teams have come into Utah and won the last 4 or 5 years? That list is not long, and it might be non-existent. I can't remember who beat Utah and where that game was this year, but I think they hadn't – I'm trying to remember what the stat was. They hadn't lost there, I think, since pre-pandemic perhaps, or pandemic year, something like that. It's been a minute.
Yeah, not only that, but it was the season opening game. Every seat's filled. The whole place was red. That was a fun game to watch. It was just – I think Florida got a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest with you. And look, teams grow as the season goes on, and we saw the egg they laid in Lexington when Ray Davis went crazy on them. But they grow, and last week was telling to me, man. They're down 10 points in the fourth quarter, find a way to come back to win it on the road. Mertz throws for 400 yards and a couple touchdowns. Like, that's impressive. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
So you have the momentum coming in this game, and then on the other side, there's that little bit of doubt, especially with Bowers out. Like I said, I think this is going to be really intriguing. I do.
Yeah, and they needed that because remember that was just 2 weeks removed from that debacle in Lexington where they
Yeah.
just got jumped from the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I've said this so many times, and I'm reminiscing on my days as a player in this conference because it's such a roller coaster ride. It's such a roller coaster ride mentally for yourself, but also in your team. When we found a way to beat Kentucky last year, we turned around and played Florida the next week. I don't think we beat Florida if we didn't win Kentucky the weekend before. And
Yeah.
so it's the momentum like that. And so Florida coming off that, great comeback in Columbia, winning on the road. And for Florida, they've struggled away from the swamp. They're 2-13 in their past 15 games away from home. And so they have not been great at all away from the swamp. Look, they've been fine when they're playing at home. And now not only are you not playing on the road, but it's a neutral site game against your biggest rival. You're going to have, hopefully a lot of your fans in there as well. I know Georgia travels well, but still neutral site game. You're 2-13, your past 15 games away from the swamp. If there's a time to change, it's right now for Florida.
Yeah, and there's playing away from home and there's playing neutral site games.
Agreed.
And this is the neutral site game. Look, last year, it was 42-20, so it wasn't that close. But I think this Florida team is better than that one, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this Georgia team is not as good as what we saw a year ago.
Yeah, and I said this, I think, yesterday on the show, too, is I've seen Georgia beat Georgia, like the Georgia that we know, once this year, and that was against Kentucky, where they just totally dominated. But I've only seen that once. I think the one that was really telling to me was, look, it was on the road, but that game against Auburn, they really struggled. And the only reason they won that game is because 19 decided to win it by himself, and he's not there this week. He may not be for a little bit. And so, the intricacies of these games, of this game specifically that I was speaking on earlier, it's going to come down to, is someone going to step up on this Georgia receiving corps? Carson Beck's thrown 12 touchdowns. A third of them have gone to Brock Bowers, who's sitting on the bench in a boot. And so someone's needs to step up. Is it Levette? Is it, Roseby Jackson? Whoever it is, somebody's got to step up and be the go-to guy because, if they get down to the fourth quarter and this is a crunch time game, that's Brock Bowers' time. And he delivers every single time. That guy's not there anymore. And so what's it going to be for this Georgia offense when they need that big third down, when they need that big fourth down conversion, to go and win this game? It's going to be interesting to see who stands out.
Who scares you on that Georgia offense the most now that Bowers is not available? Look, it's not like they don't have dudes. They just took the best receiver off 2 SEC teams,
right? And
they've been parked in the garage a good bit of the year. Before we write off Georgia and say, they're not last year. Let's there's a footnote there that's kind of important. Is that they've still got dudes.
No, they still got dudes. But look, and we've all seen it. Georgia's had 30 guys drafted in the past 2 drafts. So they just absolute factory of talent. And you go back and look at the recruiting rankings. It's not like their recruiting has dropped off and then you're like that. They just need guys to come into their own and develop. And look, this is a little bit of a product of these guys that are playing now, sitting behind the guys that get drafted for a year or two, and they're still developing, into football players and getting their timing right. But still, there's no short of talent. When I look at this roster, so I just talked about, someone needs to step up because if they get into a tight game here in the second half, their go-to guys not in the field. For me, that's Levette. That dude was so dangerous at Missouri. Not necessarily over the top, because that was Luther Burden, and the Showtime and the highlight reels that everybody saw was Luther Burden. But Levette got them like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. He was the go-to guy in those situations to get those chunks of 12, 15. I need to see him more involved. And look, they did it a little bit last week, or not last week, but last game against Vandy. Got a touchdown. I'm also waiting for Ladd McConkey to score his first one of the year. Was banged up to start the year as well. He was Stetson. You talk about go-to guys. That was Stetson Bennett's go-to guy. Was Ladd McConkey. And you know what? I like watching that dude play. He's twitchy. He plays with a little bit of an edge, and I can totally respect that. And so those 2 guys are, the 2 guys that I'm thinking need to step up and see an increase in targets, increase in catches. But it's going to be really interesting to see if they change their philosophy without their big-time tight end in there.
Yeah, and you mentioned some things I'm going to use to jump into one of my big 3 points on how I think Florida could beat them. Not saying will, just drawing up a map here because every weekend there's stuff that happens that we don't see coming. But I think one of the biggest stats in the league, and I don't know how much it gets talked about outside of here. I've heard it mentioned a time or two. You look at plays per game, Gavin.
Yep.
Florida's offense on average on the field, 68 plays a game. The defense on the field for 55. When you get 13 more snaps than your opponents week in and week out, that adds up. That is generally a winning recipe.
Oh, absolutely. And look, what that comes down to is what Graham Mertz is really good at, and that's not turning the ball over. When you give free possessions to another team, and not only in this case another team, but the number one team in the country who's won back-to-back national titles, you're not going to win the game. And so, look, Mertz has thrown 2 picks all year. There's some sack fumbles in there and whatnot, but overall, he's done a pretty good job. And you talk about running more plays, and I have a list here. I don't want to run totally down them, but my first key of the game for Florida to win the game is third down conversion. Yeah. And the whole reason that is because it keeps like I said, keeps your offense on the field, keeps their offense off the field, and continues the drive. And Florida's been pretty good at that this year. This is the time in the week. It's Thursday. Today, let's say, I just want to walk you through a week of prep for this conference. So people Monday, Sunday, one of those is going to be an off day. The other one is going to be like a recap of the game on Saturday. You get into Monday, and Monday night especially, you start prepping. Tuesday morning, you show up, or if you practice in the afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, you show up, and that's like a full padded, go hard, first and second down, run, play, action, pass. You get into Wednesday. Wednesday usually is all third down. Third and long, which is 10 to 12, third and medium, which is 7 to 10, and then third and short, which is like 5. And so then you get in Thursday, which is today, and you're running through the plan, maybe a little bit of red zone. And so as we speak right now, they're probably going through their third down plan. I'm interested to see what that's going to be. How do they utilize Ricky Pearsall? You talk about being a go-to guy. That guy's having a career, came from the Pac-12, was a good player in the Pac-12, and is already surpassing his numbers from what he had in the Pac-12. Dude is absolutely thriving at the University of Florida and has a unique connection, I think, with Graham Mertz. And so, what's their plan on third down? Do they try to get to Pearsall on some short routes and let him run? Do they lean on the run game if it gets down to third and short? That's going to be the things I'm looking for early in this game, Chris.
Yeah, and again, it's one of these things. I think we went over this maybe Monday. Their third down conversions have not been good. I think they're one of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the league. But again, I think the key to them is they don't get to third down as much as other teams do. I think they've got one of the lowest
way to convert on third down
numbers. Right. One of the lowest numbers of third. I think they're so good on first and second down. And again, this is not a team that is explosive. I was looking at I think it was the, I can't remember if it was the South Carolina game, but I was looking like they completed a bunch of throws. I think they had like 5 guys that caught balls for 10 yards or more, but nobody that caught it for more than 18. And when you're doing that and you're Graham Mertz and you're completing 73.5% of your throws, look, I know completion percentage is sort of out of vogue in this day and age because we look more at yards per attempt and everything.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between if you're getting, and let me see what they get per pass play. I think it's 7 or 8 yards per pass play. It's 7.2, which is pretty nice. And again, that subtracts sacks. Sacks are a pass play that became a running play and gets recorded, but it's really not. Here's what I'm getting at. Okay. If you're going 0, 0, 0, 32, that's 8 yards a throw.
Yeah.
But you probably got a punt in there somewhere too, unless
Absolutely.
that 32 comes on fourth down. If you go 8, 8, 8, 8, you got 2nd and 2 becomes 1st and 10 and so on. And I think that's
it.
I think that's the thing that's really behind their success.
That's what it is, Chris. As we talked about, the best third down conversion, the best way to convert third downs is to avoid third downs. Okay, well, the second best way is to be efficient on first and second down and make those third downs be third and short. As an offensive player, 1st and 10, especially if it's downs and 10, which is basically the first play of the drive. First play of the drive, a lot of times what you'll see is if you watch first play of the drive, just watch all across college football, but Georgia does it a lot. First down and 10, which is first play of the possession, Georgia will shift really quick on the defensive line to try to get you to jump, like a quick twitch or a move call. try to get you to jump, back you up 1st and 15. That's a big hole to go out of. It is. And that's why holding calls are just drive killers, absolute drive killers, because it's not 5, it's 10. And so the best way to avoid third down, or best way to convert third down besides avoiding it, is to make those third downs be 3rd and shorts. When you get into 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and you know you're throwing it, every other team knows you're throwing it, that's really intimidating. And the pass rushers can cut loose. I mean, that's a very intimidating place to be for an offense, and you're almost elated if you convert a 3rd and long. And so avoiding the 3rd and longs, the best way to do that is be efficient on 1st and 2nd down, and that's something Florida's been really good at this year.
Yeah, and here's another thing: penalties. They're around 48 a game. That's probably about 5 or 6 yards higher than Billy Napier would like it. I think when you're in the low 40s or 30s, that's pretty elite. Most teams are in the 50s. The bad teams are 60s and 70s, and they've gotten 47 penalties. So that's probably a little more than you like, but that's about 5 a game. Sometimes it's not the penalty yards, but it's the penalty.
Yeah.
It's backing up a 2nd and goal or a 3rd and goal from the 1 to a 3rd and 6. That changes your playbook. That has been a hallmark of Billy Napier's teams too. And again, I think they were a little better at it last year, avoiding those kinds of things. And that helps too.
Well, look, it's an imperfect game. Look, you're going to have flags here and there. And the ones that you got to avoid, though, we call it the hidden yardage battle. And so as players, you think about, for example, if you get a 20-yard punt return, which is a lot of yards for a special teams play, and that gets negated for a block in the back, that's a 15-yard. That's a 35-yard penalty. That's hidden yardage within the game. See it a lot on kickoffs too. Where I see it the most, really, and this isn't a penalty, but you talk about hidden yardage in the game. One of the most critical parts that I think the average fan dismisses is fielding punts. If you don't field the punt at the 20 and it bounces to the 3, that's a 17-yard play. And so fielding punts, when that ball goes up in the air, I don't care where it's at. If it's going to drop in the field of play, maybe not the 6th if you want to let it roll into the end zone, but I am begging my punt returner to go up there and catch the ball, because that's 15, 20 yards, depending on the roll, of hidden yardage for your offense. That drives special teams coordinators crazy. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience.
Yes, you are. Well, guess who they got returning punts?
Yeah.
Ricky Pearsall.
That's right.
So, and to that, I want to. We've gone over this ball control thing for them. I want to make it clear. It's not like they're just a dink and dunk team without explosive ability. Pearsall has this year, I think in a lot of other years, would have been a first-team receiver. You remember the pass that he caught?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the catch of the year in college football. Long receptions this year. Pearsall, 50. Khalil Jackson, 45. Caleb Douglas, 34. Eugene Wilson III, 30. Arliss Boardingham, 25. I'm a little surprised he's not had one longer than that. Andy Jean, 32. Marcus Burke, 37. They have got some guys in here. It's not LSU and Brian Thomas and that bunch, but they do have a little bit of ability to bust one on you. And the other part of that is the rushing attack.
That's
and you remember the play that broke the Tennessee game open was what, Gavin? It was Trevor Etienne's 62-yard touchdown run early in the game. Yep. Johnson's got a long of 34. Webb has got a long of 43. So let me do a quick count of this. I didn't do this in the show prep, but guys that have generated plays of 30 yards or more, that's 3 there, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 different guys by my count that have generated plays of 30 yards or more in this offense. And I'm guessing that's more than most teams.
I'm not really worried. I would say, and you hear this all the time on TV with the analysts and, coaching interviews as well. They talk about, we got to establish the run. We got to establish the run. I'm not really worried about Florida establishing the run, because to me, that's their identity. I think they're going to try to do that regardless. And so, you talk about these big plays happening downfield from multiple guys. That's because of the rushing attack. When you are running the ball well, and you need as a defensive coordinator and a player, you're going to the sidelines thinking, hey, we need another guy in the box. Like, we need to stop this run more than anything. You get the safeties, you get the corners, their eyes, and that's the stuff that opens up downfield for Mertz and company. And so, look, establishing the run's important, but I actually expect Florida to do that, even though they're playing against Georgia. Look, Georgia doesn't have like a Jordan Davis type player this year, clogging up the middle of the field. They have great, 5-star defensive linemen, don't get me wrong. but there's no Jordan Davis. There's no why am I blanking on my man's name? Jalen Carter. There's no Jalen Carter. And so, look, they got great players, but there's not that behemoth in there that just disallows you to run the ball. Florida's going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
If they can do that, it's going to open up the play action over the top.
Okay, before we get to points 2 and 3 on how I think Florida can win the game, just a quick word from our sponsors, CHOMPS. It's a go-to snack for you after your workouts, at halftime, whatever. 9 to 10 grams of protein, 60 to 100 calories per stick. Gluten-free, free the top 9 allergens, no hidden harmful ingredients. So it's great for the Lee household because we got kids that are allergic to this or that every now and then. You need a quick snack. We are always on the go to ball games, tryouts, play practice, whatever. Doing shows in a pinch and needing a snack. I'm out of these because our family's torn through the boxes we had. And what you want to get is the trial pack that comes with 6 different flavors and all 3 proteins. Go to chomps.com, use our promo code that you see below to get 15% off your order and help out the folks who help our show. The other sponsor I want to point out to you, and love this guy. I know Andy Ludicky personally. He's a fantastic human being. If you're sick of working for someone else and looking for a better life that you can live more on your terms, the guy who can help you with that is Andy Ludicky of myperfectfranchise.net. He will help you find the perfect franchise based on your goals, your dreams, your skills, your financial requirements. In other words, your personalized American dream. He will educate you on the process, work with you every step of the way. One of the best parts about that, no obligation. His services are free. He will invest time in you before you've spent a dime on anything. So call him 404-973-9901. Fill out a free questionnaire to get started. What Andy will do is, in good conscience, match you with companies that have needs for a skill set similar to yours, and also your family goals and those kind of things, to give you the time you want. Call Andy Ludicky. Again, that number 404-973-9901. Tell him you heard about it here on Southeastern 14, and I think you'll be really happy what Andy can do to help you. Okay. Point number 2, which I will find shortly. Okay. Game flow.
Yeah.
Game flow is a big thing. What happened to Tennessee when Florida jumped out early?
Yeah, they got a little stunned.
Never recovered. What happened to Kentucky what happened to Florida when it went to Lexington?
Got stunned.
And Ray Davis ate the entire Gator defense in one bite in the first half.
Yeah. I'm so glad we're touching on this, Chris, because this is my second key to the game. It is. And so let's just get right into it. For me, I talked about the 3 keys to the game for Florida to win this game. Third down conversions, best way to do that. Avoid third down, but then when you do face third down, be efficient on first and second, so it's third and short. Second to me is eliminate the explosives on the Georgia side of the ball, especially early in the game. If you can get early in the game, and I'm telling you, there's a little bit – I'm not saying that – look, I do still expect Georgia to win this game. I do. But – you're lying to yourself and maybe to this team too if you think that they're just going to be the same exact team without Brock Bowers. He's their leading receiver. He's the best tight end in the country. There's that little speckle of doubt in the back of their minds. If you can make that grow a little bit early in the game by eliminating the explosives, still waiting for someone to step up in that Georgia offense, if you can go into the second, maybe even the third quarter, and Georgia's still waiting for someone to make a play, you can stun them a little bit, especially if you're finding success on the offensive side of the ball. So eliminating explosives early in the game is going to be huge for Florida in terms of, dictating the terms and the game flow, as you said, Chris.
Now, Georgia did survive one of those scenarios.
Yeah.
It was against South Carolina, but 2 big differences. That was in Athens, A, and B, I think this Florida team is better than that Carolina team. Well, hey, they just played and Carolina won the game in Columbia. So,
yeah, no, agreed. And that's what it was too, is, they kind of came out. I remember watching that first drive, and remember South Carolina threw this little screen pass to Juice Wells, and he made like 4 guys miss.
Yeah.
And it was 7-0 in the blink of an eye, and Georgia was kind of like, whoa. Something like that needs to happen, but it may react differently now that, like I said, Bowers is there and this game is not in Athens. But Florida needs a great start just like that. Maybe even another score, make it 10-14. and really kind of put some doubt in Georgia's mind and put their backs up against the wall. Because we know when Florida's backs are against the wall, we just saw it last week, and they came out firing. And I'm excited to see if Georgia's got that in them as well. I think they do. You know, Kirby, look, I hate we're talking Florida keys here. I still have a bunch of confidence in Georgia. But if Florida's going to win this game, these are the things they need to do.
Well, we talked about the snap count, how Florida's out-snapping teams on average by 13 a game. Now, you look at the Tennessee box score, and it wasn't like that. It was 67-64, which is fairly insignificant. But here is where that didn't really apply. It was the fact that game was 26-7 at the half. Mertz threw the ball 24 times, only had 5 incompletions. So, again, that keeps the clock running, which against Tennessee, which averages, let me see, Tennessee averages, I think, in the neighborhood of 71, 72 snaps.
Yeah.
72. So it was eight off what it normally got against Florida. And again, that is, you know, what does an incomplete pass do? It stops the clock. When you've got a guy that it's accurate at nearly a 75% clip, and he's not having to throw the ball, that's what happened. Florida shortened the game on Tennessee.
Yep.
And when it played from ahead, it made Tennessee have to do what Tennessee didn't want, which was to trust Joe Milton downfield. Yeah. And so, look, I think they're facing a better quarterback on the other side. And, again, we have seen Georgia escape the scenario once, but that is the way I think – that is one of the ways that I think you do want to get a lead early and limit Georgia's playbook, because Georgia's very balanced, Gavin. Yeah. Georgia, the last couple of years, the run-pass balance has been really close to 50-50, and they've been very effective both ways. If you can take out part of the playbook, that is another step towards winning. Easier said than done, and we're also talking about Georgia, which is better than most teams you're going to play. I just want to point that out. But, again, what we are painting are scenarios by which Florida could win, and I think that would be a key ingredient.
Well, I also think, too, like, let's say this, because, you know, in my experience in this conference, a team who had that identity that you just said, Chris, that you prepare for in terms of, you know, this is a team that wants to, you know, run the clock, and that was Kentucky forever. That was Kentucky. They had the bell cow backs. You know, they still do in Ray Davis, but I think that they're a little bit different this year. You know, when you used to prepare for Florida in the past, the first thing that comes to mind is speed. You know, they can get any guy out of really anywhere in Florida, and they're always going to have speed on the edge, you know, and in the secondary, and then also, you know, in the receiving room. They still have that, but now they're obviously, like we said, they're leaning on this run, and then not only that, but when they do throw the ball, they complete it 80% of the time, which runs the clock. You know, you can get to a point here where Florida can put together a long drive. You know, they can take an absolute chunk out of a quarter. And you look up as an offensive, especially if it's early in the game, you can look up as Georgia's offense. And if Florida goes, you know, gets the ball first and drives the whole length of the field, you know, you can look up and you don't even touch the field until 6 minutes left. And it's very possible. And so, look, your possessions are going to be limited, which means you got to be more aggressive on 3rd and shorts, 4th and shorts, whatever it is. And then the biggest key really is being able to convert touchdowns in the red zone. You know, 3 versus 7. You hold them to 3, that's a win for the defense. That is a win for the defense. The defense wins 4-3. And so when you get a stop in the red zone and you hold them to 3 over 7, it changes the complexion of the game. Look at Tennessee and Alabama last week. You know, if those 2 field goals end up being touchdowns, you know, we may be sitting here saying Tennessee won that game. It's very possible. You're up 21-0, but you hold them now 13-0. You climb yourself back into the game, build some momentum. And so that's really what it is, Chris. And look, like I said, I think there's so many – maybe a little more question marks in this game than we can remember of years past, because of the Bowers injury, because of the recent surge in Florida, because of Georgia not being the juggernaut that we've used to seeing week after week after week. You know, there's some really small things in this game that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Yeah,
and back to the game flow thing, what happened to Florida against Utah? Utah hits a big pass play, the first play of the game.
Yeah.
Florida goes in wanting to run. They had to throw it a lot more than they did. Had some protection issues, which that happens week 1, and it got off the script for them. Hurry. I mean, I just think game flow is so important to the way that Florida wants to win and needs to win.
Yeah, and you know what? This I'm going to go ahead and say it, because this leads to my third key of the game. I talked about the first key. This is all for Florida. Like I said, I'm still confident Georgia's going to win this game, but if Florida's going to win, then these are the 3 things they need to do. First thing, like I said, third down percentage. Second thing, eliminate the explosive. Third thing, and you talk about game flow, Chris, this is how you flip it upside down. If Florida can find a way to get a defensive or a special teams touchdown, that is stunning for the other side. And so that's my third key of the game for Florida. Find a way to get a defensive, special teams touchdown, basically a touchdown in an unconventional way. When we played Florida last year at Vandy, we got a touchdown on a muff punt, and we recovered it in the end zone. And really at that point, the whole momentum of the entire game shifted, and you kind of knew you were going to win the game. And those plays are this small, but they happen like that. And so you never know what's going to happen, but when it does, you better take advantage of the opportunity. So a defensive or special teams touchdown can really, really talk about dictating the flow, but can really also lean it in, more so into your hands, Chris.
I want to get into Florida defense a minute and ask you, look, you played against them a year ago when you were at Vandy. I think most people watching the show know that. Of course, you were not in the defensive room, but I presume you had friends on the team that played defense. And you also saw them in person. What were the things about – it was a different offense a year ago, right? Because Anthony Richardson was a freak. Yeah. He's with Colts now. Johnson and Etienne are both very good backs. I don't know which one – scared you guys the most, but any insight on Florida and maybe the running part of the attack, what you have to watch for there, because you guys shut that down last year and that's why you beat them, among other things.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's, there's some similarities. At the same time, every single offense in this conference and really in this country, it goes through the quarterback. And so last year when we were playing Florida, obviously all eyes were on 15, Anthony Richardson, and we had to account for him kind of being a runner because he was a guy who, look, maybe the consistency wasn't there. He wasn't the same player every game, but when that dude was on and he broke a long run, it was over with. And so the big explosive plays, you had to watch out for him running. That's not something I think that Georgia's preparing for this week. I don't think they're preparing for Mertz to pull it on a read option and go 80 yards to the house. In terms of the rushing attack with those two guys, Etienne scares me a little more if I'm a defensive guy. A little more elusive, plays a lot like his brother. But it's about shutting down the run. And so for us last year, like you said, Chris, we were able to do that. We neutralized that early, and it made them throw the ball downfield and putting them in the third and longs instead of the 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. If you get 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, especially 3rd and 11 when you're behind the sticks, that should be a win for the defense really most of the time. And that's what we found a way to do last year, and sure enough, we won the game. All
right, third thing, and this comes into play a lot of games, is turnovers. And frankly, neither team has been very good here. Georgia's a net 0 on turnovers this year. Florida is -2, which is uncharacteristic. I remember one of the things that they carried late in the season, I don't remember where it ended up, but going to those final few games, they were, I think, leading the conference in turnover margin and fewest penalties. So that's something Florida needs to flip back to where it was a year ago. But look, you just pointed out a minute ago, you get an explosive play, you get a pick six, a fumble return inside the 20. Those are things, if it becomes a low possession game, that can flip an outcome.
Yeah, let's look at it last week. There, that Alabama-Tennessee game was such a unique game to watch, in my opinion, because you saw Tennessee come out the gates hot, and looked great. And then all of a sudden, Alabama got some red zone stops and came on a surge a little bit. But where did the game really turn to be like, okay, wow, Alabama's going to win this game? Was the sack, fumble, and scoop and score, right? And that's where the game changed. And so for me, there's going to be a moment in this game, whether it is a sack, fumble, and if Florida can find a way to scoop and score that, if Florida can find a way to pick six Carson Beck, in a tight game, that's the difference between winning and losing. It is. And, I've seen it. Florida has the guys in the back end. Like I said, they got speed. They've always had talent back there. Especially being able to run with some receivers who are dudes, but, we need to see them step up to be those, elite receivers, especially without, number 19, Brock Bowers, in there.
What do you see on their defense that stands out and maybe where they're vulnerable? Because look, Georgia, I get that Georgia is not the last 2 years Georgia, but it's still averaging 7.1 yards a snap. Carson Beck, I think, has been pretty good. There have been some mistakes here and there, but he's a first-year starter. You saw that with Stetson Bennett. I know they've got, a 420-pounder up front who's going to take up some room. Yeah, that's for sure. They've got Jason Marshall Jr. on the back end, who's a potential first-rounder. They've got a couple of good up-and-coming safeties.
Yeah.
What do you see as the strengths and the weaknesses of Florida's defense?
When I was playing, when I in my days of playing Florida, I remember the biggest thing was their edges were big and long and really strong. So for me, when I was playing them, it was Brenton Cox, who wore number 1 with Florida, and you talk about that guy. He had a heck of a journey through the SEC with Georgia and then eventually at Florida. And to be honest with you, and I think he stopped playing like midway through last year. Didn't that happen or something? And now I think he
got kicked off.
Yeah, something like that. But regardless, I mean, that dude was like 6'7", long as can be. Got Zach Carter is another guy that comes to mind. Like these are the guys that I had to block when I was playing against them. I don't see those maybe talent or as dangerous as I mean, those were you asked to build pass rushers in a lab, and those two are the guys coming out. And so I'm not necessarily seeing that level of play. At the same time, look, like I said, Florida, and that's such a luxury of being the head coach there of Napier, is there's guys like that in their backyard everywhere. And so being able to go out and get that, even on the secondary, there's a million DBs in Florida. There's everybody in the state of Florida can run. That's the good news is, and Florida's always going to be able to run. The question really in the past has been, and I hate to say this about a program, but it's the truth of every year that we prepared for Florida is, is the effort going to be there? And I think that Napier has set that culture, and running to the ball, and as simple as that sounds, that's game-saving tackles if a guy's hustling down the field and can be the difference in the game. And so, I'm not seeing, to answer long-winded here, Chris, but to answer the question, I don't know if there's the talent that was there when I was preparing for him, especially on the edges. But I mean, let's not act like these guys still aren't, SEC quality players for sure.
Yeah, and look, every fan base is a little nuts. So we're not picking on Florida in particular here, but you can't fire a coach in one breath and say, well, it's because he's not bringing in talent, and the next breath hold the guy behind him accountable because you're not back to national prominence immediately. And I've been saying that, I think Dan Mullen's teams had a discipline problem at times. You're talking about a guy that's going through a culture change. That does not, the great Nick Saban, best coach in any sport in my lifetime.
Yeah.
They won 6 or 7 games his first year, lost to Louisiana Monroe. Now they flipped it in year 2. I wouldn't say Florida's done that, although I would say it feels like it's starting to turn in a good way. So I've always thought that the Sunbelt Billy nonsense was garbage. Again, I think he's, from what I have heard, and unless it's changed recently, I think he's very well respected in the league. And the thought was that he was going to get this turned around. He was eventually going to recruit, and he's starting to change the culture, I feel like. And you look at recruiting, this is what a top 3 recruiting class right now in the country for next year.
And that's
no, the portal makes that maybe a little less important, but it is what it is. Look, he's back there showing that he can compete with the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Georgias of the world and win recruiting battles. And to me, he's just one or two. He's maybe one signature win away from maybe flipping that narrative, given the way he's recruiting.
Well, let's look at it, man, because when we came into this year, let's be candid. We said when Billy Napier first got hired, and especially within the Florida fan base, their narrative was, oh, Mullen quit on recruiting. He's got to bring, his own guys in here. And then after 1 year, they're basically saying that seat's getting a little warm. That's probably a little premature. And then you open the season in that embarrassing way at Utah, and they were claiming it's getting a little bit warmer. You got to give this guy a little bit of time. But, going to the recruiting thing, the reason why the expectations from the fan base within this conference for the University of Florida is so high is because that should not be a tough place to recruit. It is not. I mean, when you go, their facility looks like, a country club, and they have a pool out front, and it's just, and then not only that, but you have, the University of, it's warm all year, the recruiting, the hotbeds, the high school football in the state of Florida. It is not a tough place to recruit. As you can see, they're top 3, top 5 in recruiting now, competing against Alabama, Ohio State, all these guys. And so, Chris, we're seeing it on the back end in recruiting, him competing with the big dogs. And when I say the big dogs, LSU, Ohio State, Alabama, now we're just waiting for a win against one of those teams, right? If you're winning in recruiting, that's great. But we need to see it on the field as well. And who knows, maybe it is this weekend against Georgia. If it is, absolutely, I agree with you. We're waiting for one big signature win for Billy Napier to say, okay, you know what, this guy knows what he's doing. He deserves a little bit more time and definitely get some more trust in Gator fans. And so maybe one win away. Is it this weekend? Maybe not. But I think he's done a great job, especially being a year and a half in to his tenure.
All right, 2 more days of talk before we hit Saturday. We will be here for it. We apologize for today. We usually come on at 11 Central. Just could not be helped. I had to come on at 11:15 because of a family errand. And so we'll be back at it at 11 on Thursday. Don't know the topic yet. Friday is usually Trey Wallace Friday. So hopefully we'll get Trey back on after a busy week for him last week. Thank you guys for being here as usual in the chat. Yeah, hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Hit the like buttons; those help our analytics. Tell a friend. Basketball starting soon. We're working on a plan for that, and just can't wait for it. But anyway, thanks for watching. We'll be back on Thursday from about 11 to 11:30ish, 11:45ish, depending on what we get into and how long we want to go. For Gavin Schoenwald, I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14. This is the SEC Daily. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you again soon.